Welcome, welcome, welcome to another edition of the Nonfiction Book Panel. My name is Zakira, and I am the moderator as well as one of the authors on the panel. Today, we are talking to mothers. So, if you are new to the nonfiction book panel, it started about a year ago, kind of in the height of the pandemic. I'm the author of a book called Seeing Life Through a Different Lens as Cancer Survivor's Memoir on Overcoming Adversity with Resilience. It was written by my mom and I. So I'm releasing my book at the height of the pandemic. Before it was publicized, but it was actually publicized. I didn't get to have my own book tour, but I wanted to still celebrate virtually. So I reached out to my closest author friend to see if they could just join me online. And everyone loved the conversation so much that they wanted it to be a continuous conversation on how to really help other authors and be a source of inspiration to other women, especially those who are ready to tell their story through podcasts, through books, through writing. And that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been able to pivot. I am known as a professional photographer, but ever since releasing my own story, people have labeled me as the visionary that really helps other women to step outside of their comfort zone. So that's exactly what you're definitely going to be doing today. If you're watching, be sure to share this video now so you can have it on your profile to watch it later because there's going to be a lot of inspirational gems. And the funny thing about this panel is even though this is about I think this is maybe the ninth or 10th one that we've done. This is almost like a full circle moment for me because not only do I have the podcast called See Life Different, which we previously named Living Legacy, I also did a summit, a virtual conference that kind of celebrated the 2 years of being a podcaster. And then some of these ladies have happily returned. So now they are authors, some new authors, some are now authors of more books. So we're having that conversation again. But the most fun part about this conversation is the fact that these ladies are moms. They are moms, and I feel like it's going to be super important to focus on the parental side of our story because we have to grow through what we go through, right? So I'm going to start introducing from my right and then move on right now. So, start from left up. Once again, my name is Akil. I am a cancer survivor, a creative strategist, and a professional photographer. So, I also have founded a creative marketing agency group where I help women to confidently share their stories online and offline. So, I'm also the author of Seeing Life Through a Different Lens, a cancer survivor's memoir on overcoming adversity with resilience, where my mom and I both talk about what it was like to survive as a millennial with a rare childhood eye cancer called retinoblastoma. And then right over to my right, we have Ronit. She is an award-winning writer, host, and producer of her own podcast, And Then Everything Changed. And she's the former co-host of a different podcast called Mouthy, Messy, and Mandatory. So she's a native New Yorker turned West Coaster. So she went from New York to the West Coast, and you'll find out exactly why, because she is also the author of the memoir When She Comes Back, where she talked about, very, very vividly, I would say, the loss of her mother to the guru that very kind of caused a bit of a friction in a relationship until they had their reconciliation. And it's award winning. She's an award winning writer and she loves stories as well. She used to be an actress. So all things creative, that's her. And she's a mom and a wife too. And then right below us, we have Miss Carol Mulletta. She is a parenting strategist. So that is going to be a conversation in itself. Right? We all need help. It takes a tribe to really raise children, and not just one child. She has two of them, the same age because they're twins, right? So she created the Parenting 411, which is a community where she engages parents and awakens the joy in their journey of parenting. So she helped to foster children's success in school and life, and she's also a radio show host as well, the Parenting 411 radio show, and a three-time best-selling author, but most recently mother's work, pearls of wisdom and gems from my journey. So we're going to learn all about that, and I'm just so happy to have these ladies here today. Don't forget to share this video, and if you are an author that has released a book already, you've done a few live video sessions as well, I'll provide the link in our description so that you too can be an author sharing your story right here on this panel. We're always looking for women to share their story. You don't have to be self-published. Even if you work with an independent publisher, you can get your story out there too. So without further ado, I'm going to say hi to Carol and Ronit. Hello. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi,
Hello.
thank you so much for having us. Yes, I appreciate it.
Yay! Okay, so I want to start with a fun um, fill in the blank kind of scenario. All right. So the sentence is a mother's love is blank. Right. So come up with one word. I'll start with Ronit. I'll come up with one word, and then after you each say your word, you'll come back around and tell me why you chose that word. So a mother's love is blank.
Unwavering.
And in that same spirit, I was thinking unconditional.
Let's start with why untraditional. Let's start with that. Tell me why, Carol.
Well, because I mean, once those children are placed in your arms, whether you birthed them or whether you have received that gift from another means, you just are committed and invested in them. And there are going to be some times when they might make decisions you don't agree with, or behavior. You always want to see them win. You always want to see them rise up, and you always have hope for them. So, I mean, that's why it's unconditional, really.
I love that. Never need. Tell me more about your word.
I feel like I would say yes, Carol. Mine is very similar to yours. We kind of went with the same feeling of constancy and stability in the love. And I think that as a mom now, I understand what it's like to. Do you hear that echo, Zakira? Or no? No? Okay. So I feel like as a mom, I've learned that no matter how frustrating things get or how unexpected things get, you always love your kids no matter what. And, I think that kids should also be able to know that too and be able to feel that, if they have a good relationship with their parents and vice versa. I feel like a kid will know that no matter how bad they behave or whatever trouble they get into, their mom is there for them without conditions and without wavering.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important. I'm so glad you mentioned that because that just reminded me that in my book, Seeing Life Through Different Lens, the introduction, we actually talked about that, about our relationship, interesting enough, was not toxic, right? And when you throw in trauma of any kind, it can be easily labeled as I have a very toxic relationship with my mother. Like a lot of people would say that, not just with cancer, but with anything that you would define as traumatic. A lot of mothers and daughters feel like that the friction starts there. But I think if we unravel all the stories that we've told ourselves, or that we've heard, we think that it's not. We think that it's conditional. We think that it is waving. But I love that. I love that. I love that. All right, perfect. So we're jumping right into it. Now, my first question for the both of you, and whoever wants to go first can do that. Um, how has releasing your book changed your life? Now, these are your stories. Like, it's not necessarily you're talking about your expertise, but you're talking about your story. Now, how has releasing that story changed your life?
Carol?
Oh, sure. First, it just feels good to get my story out there. And writing a book was a bucket list item for me. So there was that. But I also have to just say it's really fulfilling to be able to encourage others with my story and the lessons learned. And I've gotten, very good feedback, and people will write me and say, on page 32, what you said there really resonated with me. So that means a lot. And it also has just exposed me to, a lot more, a much wider audience, people that, didn't work with me directly. Now they know more about me. And the people who have worked with me know a little bit more about my story. I certainly share anecdotes when I'm teaching a class or leading a webinar. I will share small stories, but to really give them a full picture of my journey has really given them an interesting perspective on what I talk about and what I believe and what I put out there into the world.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, good. And can you say something, Zakira, just to make sure I can hear you? Great, great,
Testing,
great,
one,
great.
two, three.
Perfect. I just switched because I felt like I was echoing. So now I look like I'm in full podcast mode. Anyway, so in terms of for me, there on the first thing that popped into my head, because I feel like I want to answer this question so carefully, is that I guess I feel like a sense of relief. And Carol, you have several books out there. It sounds like you have 3 books, and this is my first one. My second book is coming out in the spring, and that's a collection of short stories. But this is my first book. So for me, there's a little bit of a pressure that's been released, or a little bit of lightness that's come about. Like it's a roller coaster ride to release your book and to get it ready for release and to have it out in the world and to see how people react to it, and for people to ask you questions about your work, especially when it's memoir. But I feel so happy that I made it to this point. I mean, 10 years ago when I started writing, if you had told me I'd have a book out and that I actually made it to this first kind of benchmark for myself, I would have been so happy and relieved. So I'd say primarily, I'm so happy I actually did it, because it's so easy not to do it. And it's so easy just to stop. And I guess I would say to anyone who has a book incubating or is getting close or is feeling frustrated, that you really can do it. I mean, I was a mom of 2 when I took my first official writing class. I'd written a little bit for the theater, and, it's not like I never knew how to write, but I never did fiction or essays ever. And my son was 2 when I started writing, and now he's going to be 14 next month. And my first book is out. I've got short stories and essays published and another book coming out. So for me, I'd say overwhelmingly, it's really just a sense of like, whew, like even if I stop today, I still have a book out, which I'm really happy about. I hope that answers that question.
It definitely does. And I think the great part about you answering that question is you pretty much said what I was going to say. It's like you have a book out, your story is out there. And all of us are podcasters, right? So we understand that you put stuff out there and people may not receive it immediately. It's a slow growth process. And the same thing about your book. It's out there. You have, lived through it. You've really lived through it. And it's going to be that part of your legacy. It's going to be there. Even when you least expect it. So one day your book is going to come right back up to number 1 out of the blue because somebody talked about something that is in your book, or you get, the biggest press feature that you unexpectedly, maybe you prepare for it, right? Because they say, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. So maybe some kind of press feature brings your book, back out of the dust. So it's out there. But also I feel like maybe I can hop over to Carol and talk about like the book bug, right? Once you write one, it doesn't stop there. Am I right, Carol?
Yes. And it's really interesting about the pandemic and the lockdown. That's why I really had the opportunity to do it. You had talked, Ronit talked about how it takes some time. That was the case. I've been talking about writing this book for probably 5 or 6 years, but lots of things would get in the way. And so I just wanted to get this one book out. But in the course of working on this book, there were some other anthologies that I had an opportunity to contribute to. And so that's really how it happened. And so like, I really wanted just this one book out. That's what I thought. But now that I've been through the process, I see more possibilities, more that I can share with my community. So yes, once you get started, once you get one, you really do feel like you want to share more. And it's not ego or anything like that. It's just that you realize you have more stories in you. Like I didn't realize that for the other books that I contributed to. I'm like, I don't know how many more stories I've got. And then I would think of one. So
That's so true. We always have stories in it that we never really realize. It's perfect. All right. So for those of you who are tuning in, thank you so much for watching. You are watching the Nonfiction Book Panel with Carol, Mulletta, and Ronit playing, and myself, Zakir Muhammad. We are all authors currently talking about memoirs. And so basically, if you are a writer, you have a story inside of you, this is the panel for you to watch. This is the one for you to be inspired by. And if you are an author that already has the book out, feel free to take a screenshot of the link right here and share this video. So let Carol and Ronit and I know what you learned the most from it, but also use this to book a call if this is something you want to do. Now, I want to kind of maybe almost go backward and let you give us a little introduction of your book. Show us your book. Let's hold it up. Let's actually get another little screenshot going for everybody. So this is the cover of your book. And maybe, Carol, you can bring up Mother's Work. You can bring up that book first. So bring up the cover of your book, and then I'll be leaving the links in the comment, but be sure to check the links in the description on ways that you can support each author. Perfect. All right. So my book, Seeing Life Through a Different Lens, Survivor's Memoir on Overcoming Adversity with Resilience, is a book. It's a okay, my mom's a ghostwriter in the book, right? But she has the most based off of the Amazon reviews, everyone loves her side of the story, right? Because you get the mom side and then you get the child side, right? So mom's side of the story is what people love to relate to. And I feel like that's the part that you're going to get the most education out of. You get to learn more about, what it was like growing up as a cancer survivor and how I had not let cancer stop me, and how, mom's intuitions are really strong. And if your mom says something, 9 out of 10 times she's going to be right. Okay.
Tell that to my daughter, because I don't know.
Oh, she'll learn. Trust me, it took me up to now to know that. So you learn that in our book, and it's also available on audiobook. So even though my mom and I didn't specifically do the audio, I intentionally chose authors narrators that would depict both of our voices. You can really feel and be a part of the story. So Seeing Life Through a Different Lens is definitely a book for you if you want to learn more about how to really cope with cancer, whether you have the cancer or you know someone who had cancer. It's a short read, a short listen, and a great source of inspiration for anyone who wants to read it. Ronit.
Oh, okay. So a little bit about the book. So this is my book. There's the one in my hand and the one behind me because I'm really doing a lot of marketing. So this is a memoir about the loss of my mom to the guru Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who is a guru that was the focus of the Netflix documentary Wild Wild Country. And you may have seen it in the news in 2018. Lots of articles about this documentary. It was a docuseries, about 6 episodes. And I had already written my memoir about growing up without my mom. And then this docuseries came out, and I realized I really need to get this in front of people faster. And so my book came out in May, just about 2 months ago. And it was a long process. I just couldn't have, forecast exactly how long it would have taken, and the different rewrites and the editing and the feedback and everything. It's a really long process. And then I showed it to my family before we went to press, just to check in. And the book covers my childhood. It's a coming of age story. So if you're interested in a story about what it's like to come of age without one of the most important people in your life there, your mom. And also the secondary story, which was that I was very close to my father for a long time growing up, but in the process of losing my mom physically in my life, I had to set boundaries and pull away emotionally from my father, because as the oldest child, I put myself in charge of a lot, and he allowed me to do that. And there came a time when I was about 12 when that became really uncomfortable for me. And so my mom left twice when I was growing up. I have a younger sister that I kind of took care of. My father trusted me with a lot of household tasks and to be an emotional support. And I was all in for a long time. But what this book does is sort of outlines how my family started, how we broke up and how everything fell apart, and how I found my way despite those obstacles. And by the end of the book, there is a whole chapter. It's an epilogue about a conversation my mom and I had in adult years, which is sort of a reconciliation conversation. So this is an 80s story. There's a lot of 80s references, which I didn't intend to, put everywhere for any other reason that they offered a backdrop, the music and the clothing. It's a Jewish story because my family's Jewish. It's an apartment story. It's a New York City story. It's an Israel story. It's a divorce story. It's a cult story or a cult survivor story. And it's learning how to be enough in your own eyes story. And so it's available wherever you get books. And I'm really pleased to be able to narrate the audiobook, which you can also get. There's a sample of the audiobook on my website. So if you go there, you can listen to the first 3 sections that I narrated. I'm a podcaster and a former actor, so I do the narration. And if you like to listen to books, I hope you'll check it out that way too.
Did you want me to go now?
Yes, go for it, Carol.
Okay, so my book was also released in May, and it's entitled Mother's Work, Pearls of Wisdom and Gems from My Journey. I hope you all can see it. And so my book is really what I would call a mini motherhood memoir. And I say mini, first of all, because it's not very long, but I feel like it is rich with nuggets that I learned that I can share with other people. And it's intentionally not very thick because I can recall when I was raising my twins when they were younger, and I was taking them to different activities or appointments and things like that. I was waiting for them a lot. And so I didn't like to have idle time. And I wasn't very into smartphones at that time. For part of their childhood, they're now 21, there weren't smartphones. So I always wanted something to read. And so I wanted something that could fit easily into my purse or into the glove box, in the car. So I thought that would be a good way to have to design this book, to have it be something that moms could refer to when they needed encouragement. And so, I'm not necessarily saying that they have to follow everything that I did, but what I am trying to show is that, I went from overwhelmed and outmanned with twin sons. I am someone who came to parenting thinking it was just going to be this fun summer camp kind of experience. We were going to have fun all the time. They were going to love anything that I asked them to do, whatever I came up with. And, in very short order, I knew that wasn't going to be the case. And so also about the first year in, we learned that one of my sons had developmental delays. So then that set me on a course of discovery, really learning a lot more about child development, human development, and what children really need from their parents to grow and develop, healthy habits and healthy self-esteem and confidence and capabilities. So this really talks about that journey. It's me figuring out how to manage twins. As I like to say, I had to let go of what I thought it was and lean into what it is to raise children in general, and certainly twins. And then also a bit about my journey of getting support for my child who had special needs. And then not as much, but a little bit of a merging of two cultures in our household, Black American and my husband's Ethiopian. And so I was really, as I reflected on my experience, 7 guideposts emerged, and I label those as my pearls of wisdom in the title of the book. And those are purpose, faith, courage, and wisdom, love and friendship, which is combined, presence, and peace. And I liked pearls of wisdom, although that's a familiar saying. What I liked about the pearls was the fact that when we think about pearls, we like to wear them as jewelry and all of that. But pearls, there's a real struggle that goes on for a pearl to even come into existence. It's a response with a clam or other type of mollusk to a grain or some kind of impurity invading its shell. And so the clam responds by wrapping that thing with nacre, and it eventually becomes a pearl. And that's what I think about in terms of motherhood. We are trying to protect the peace in our home environment, and we will We are strong, and we are going to do everything we can to keep peace in our families, and we will do whatever we have to do. And that's what happens there. So the knowledge and the lessons that are described in the book are hard earned. And so that's where the pearls of wisdom comes from.
I love that. I love that. And I'm so glad you released this book because it's definitely much needed, especially all your knowledge and expertise as a parent, not only as a parent, but also as, radio show host. You've talked to so many moms and so many parents. And so it's like all of this knowledge bundled up in one. And I'm so excited that this book is out.
Thank you.
And I'm actually glad you mentioned Ethiopia, right? Because multicultural, all of us so far have mentioned just how multicultural, we are, right? And so even for me, I think there was an excerpt, a chapter, I think chapter 4 in Seeing Life Through a Different Lens, where I talked about learning that not only is it on my mom's side that I have my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, is from the Virgin Islands, and then on my dad's side, I'm learning that the ancestry of Native American. And so it's like being multicultural. It's like, how do you know which side? And especially, I love learning and researching and traveling. So how do you learn, to really combine all of it? Because really, all of it is what makes you you, and even through your children, like they're even more multicultural than you are. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. And then actually, Carol, I have a question for you. How did you end up choosing the color purple for your book?
Well, it's really, actually, the purple is part of my logo. It is part of that. But, it's kind of a blend of my logo, which is the blue, and there's a shade of purple. The teal didn't make it into the cover design, but that's really pretty much where that comes from. And it's
okay.
Yeah,
I love that because I think that the color purple is very powerful. So I figured that's kind of where it was coming from.
Well, honestly, it happened to be because it was part of my logo. But I like what you said, so don't be surprised if I mention it again in the future.
Perfect. Okay, now Ronit, I kind of want to go back to you because for those of you who have listened to my podcast, See Life Different podcast, Ronit is a guest on my podcast, and I've told her privately that your episode is the most listened to. People are so curious about your story. I don't know how, but people listen to that episode. But the one part that I think was not there at the time that we were talking about your book is you did talk to your mom, right? Because at the time that was not there. So you want to talk about how that was added to your book?
Yes, I would love to. And Carol, I want to mention about your book. I'm so excited that you have a list of 7 there because I'm one of those people who grew up thinking if I just find the right list, if I just find the right advice, everything will change for me and I'll understand how to do it. And so I love that you've broken your book up into those elements. I think that's really helpful, especially as a mom, if you're busy, for reference. So my mom and I have always been in touch, but I would say that the thing about my story is that I think for a long time, I wasn't really maybe coming to the table with everything that was going on with me in our relationship. And I just took what I could get. And I didn't challenge her in any real way, although I'm sure I was sassy now and then as I got older. But because my mom was absent for most of my childhood, like after the age of 7 or 6, I only saw her on the weekends and then not much except for on the summers. I never had that teenage period where you sort of rebel against your mom and you get mad and you make fun of them. Like I really didn't. For me, that was a really tenuous relationship or a tenuous presence. And so I had to kind of just take what I could get and not, not really pick at it. But as I got older and she was nearby, living close to my kids and my husband and me, and I saw her more often, I found a lot of feelings being kind of dredged up. I felt angry or jealous or wondering why my kids had her in their life when I didn't. I couldn't understand why she was able to stay put at the same address for years currently, but couldn't do it when I was a kid. It was so many different feelings. I could write a book about those feelings. But I'll spare everyone because I think I need to take a break from the mom story. But so then one day after the book was written, my mom and I were sitting after dinner. We celebrate Shabbat, which is Friday night Sabbath here. You know, we're very culturally Jewish. I'm not as much religion Jewish, but culturally Jewish. And my mom and I started talking. And as I told Zakira, I just had this feeling that we were getting somewhere we hadn't been in a long time or ever. And I said, Mom, can I record this? And she was like, okay. And I put my phone on, I voice recorded it. And we had this conversation, which ended up in the book, almost verbatim. And it was a real change for us because I thought I understood our story. I thought I came to a certain peace, or, you know, I'd gotten everything I could out of our conversations, but this conversation was different. And I finally understood some things that I hadn't understood before. And, you know, our relationship really has changed in the past couple of years. I mean, it's always changing. I mean, I think our relationship with our children and our relationships as mothers, like, and vice versa, is changing all the time. But I needed to, like, I didn't need to punish her the same way that I had. And I feel like I was ready to face a lot of the truth of what had happened in a different way. And so that is kind of like a pivotal thing that wasn't even in the book. The book ended when I was 14, almost 14. And now the book ends, like, fast forwards to me being a mom and having this conversation with my mom. And I think it was a really important part of the book. And I'm really glad I was able to go back and weave that thread in.
I'm glad you were too.
What a blessing, yes, to have that perspective, that mom's perspective. And Zakira, I've shared that with you too, that was something that I really enjoyed about your book as well, to hear her voice in the book. I really enjoyed that.
And I think that also is something that we talked about when we were getting ready for the panel, Zakira. I think for all of us is just that idea of how important story is in general. And I think this really speaks to what you just said, Carol, really speaks to that idea that I have as a memoirist and as an interviewer, and even a fiction writer, which is that there is room for all of us to tell our story, our truth. And I think the truth shifts a little bit as our perspective, truth in quotes, because I think it's so much based on perspective and your view and your lens sometimes, like what you remember, what comes to the surface. But I think that, you know, Zakira, your mom and you both wrote this book, and your mom's balancing voice in there to kind of weigh out the, like, perspective you had gives the reader something. And I think it's really important for people to understand that Carol's mom book is different from a mom book I could write. And Zakira, your book about childhood cancer and surviving it is vastly different from what anyone else would write. So this is that idea of the power of story and how stories can really heal and reach across the divide.
And you know, and that's really what I hope happens with people that read my book, to just understand, like, as to the extent that specific strategies I do share. I mean, this is definitely by no means an exhaustive book on parenting strategy, but I do share some. But to the extent that those are useful, what I really had hoped to do was to give them a framework for defining motherhood on their terms, given the children that they have, and not getting so caught up in what their sisters' children are doing, or their neighbors or whatever, because we all have, I believe, we all have the children we were uniquely positioned to serve. I do believe that. And so everything that we try to teach them, the way we discipline them, all of that is in the context of our relationship, our underlying relationship. There's no cookie cutter way that you address behaviors. I mean, there's certain key concepts, but there's no cookie cutter way to relate to your child to teach them. It really depends on who the child is and who the mom is, and what, you know, you're bringing to that experience.
Yeah. And I really feel, I've been thinking a lot about it because one of my children just turned 16, my girl, and my boy, as I said, is almost 14. And I've thought before, I wonder, Carol, if this happens for you ever, or maybe not. I don't know. For me, like, it's probably a little bit of a sign of insecurity or anxiety about what happened before. But I always wish that I could go back to when they were really small, knowing what I know about their personalities now, and knowing what I know now about how to at least be more patient and be calmer, because at the time I thought I was a pretty good mom, but in hindsight, and look, I wasn't doing anything dangerous or bad, and I'm not an abusive mom by any means, but knowing what I know now and how to just kind of stay still with them and not be rushing around. I was a stay-at-home mom, but my head was like like a little hamster wheel, and I'm sure they felt that. And also, I wish I had respected maybe what I know now about my daughter, her rhythms and her tempo, and just maybe not expected certain things. And again, I'm by no means a hard driving mom. We're pretty relaxed, but in my own neurotic New York Jewish way, I'm sure that I, upset the balance for her a little bit. And so I wish that would be the biggest gift. Like if I could ever, in a dream world, go back and enjoy my children when they were super young on their own terms, knowing what I know now, that would be heaven.
Wait, before you do that though, this is where I love this panel right now, because we are all on the same page. We're like, exactly what I'm thinking is exactly what you're about to talk about. That's actually the next question, the next segue that I want to get into is, what would you tell your children, from back then that you do know now?
Carol, do you want to go, since I just yammered on for a while?
Well, first, let me say that, and I actually mentioned this in my book, that I do indeed wish that I had just settled down and enjoyed them a little bit more. I was a stay-at-home mom as well, so I certainly did spend time with them, but just really let the dishes go or didn't worry as much about doing the next thing and just enjoyed them a little bit more. Because, especially with twins, in the beginning, I was just always trying to stay ahead with, I used bottles. I wanted to use bottles once they started drinking glass bottles. So keeping those, boiling those and keeping those clean and doing this and all of that. I wish I'd enjoyed them a little bit more, but having said that, I am thankful that I was able to stay home with them and did get to spend a lot of time. So that's certainly one thing. And then as far as what I would tell them is really that, and I feel like I sort of tried to convey this to them because it was something that I didn't think about as a child. And it's a saying that I have that I admire. I didn't make it up. And that is that everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end. And so I didn't have that kind of an outlook. I was a worrier when I was younger. And so I always wanted them to look to the next day. Like even when they say misbehaved and we had to leave the park or we had to leave a birthday party. I don't know that, an example of something like that. It was always, well, you'll get another chance tomorrow. I always wanted them to feel like, it's not the end. There's always hope.
I love that. Absolutely. And just like we said earlier, is literally let it go. Let it go. And I think the great thing also is that there's a quote floating around social media about, you're a good mom, or you are a good mom if you worry about those things. Like you are a good mom because you worry. So first of all, let's give you all a pat on the back, give you all a pat on the back for you made it. Well, I think Ronit, you said 14, right? So
well, 16 and 14.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, Ronit, you might not want to hear this, but no. Well, the momming doesn't stop, honestly. They're just going to be some different situations that they get in, but it's also, you have a different relationship. And like at 21 now, they've kind of circled back to, yes, mom and dad do know something. Yes, mom and dad can relate, because there was a while there, man, we didn't know anything,
What's interesting is my sister-in-law told me years ago, I was thinking about, and this relates to writing, I was thinking about getting my master's in writing, my MFA. And I said, I think I should wait because my kids were maybe 7 and 5, 7 and 4. And I said, I guess I should wait till they get older, maybe when they're teenagers. And she said to me, 'cause she had older kids than me, she said, they need you more, just as much or more when they're teenagers. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I was making special food for my son who was so allergic and had eczema and asthma. And I was dealing with learning differences with both kids and anxiety, et cetera. And I was like, how could that possibly be? Teenagers, like, they're cooked, they're almost done, right? By teenager years. But it's been true for me that one of my kids is really nestled in and needed us in a really interesting way. And I was thinking about it the other day about, I was almost going to write an essay about this, and I have to think about it because I don't want to seem like I'm gloating or giving myself a pat on the back, but I actually feel like our family is stronger now as a family, our family of 4, than we were when they were younger. Like, the COVID experience somehow brought us to a place of closeness when it could have made it worse. Or I was worried about mental health across the board for all of us, for sure. But I was like, wow, we kind of grew leaps and bounds in the past year and a half. And I think the kids were able to see me and my husband sort of slower, staying in the house more. We watched more TV together. We hung out more. We were just on the couch together a lot more than we used to be. I mean, no hikes for this family, but I want to say, like, we went like hiking, but we didn't do that. And so I feel like the perspective and the closeness has changed. And I feel like when I used to look around at these families, these moms who would have the sign, we had these friends who had the sign behind them on the dining room table. In this family, we do this. In this family, we do this. In this family, we do this. All these rituals. And I thought, I don't have those. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't understand how to do these traditions and rituals. Mm-hmm. But I feel like now we're coming into our own as a family, where we're a lot closer to being on the same page in many ways. And I'm really grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. I think that happened with a lot of families that I've been talking to. And honestly, that was what I was talking about when it first happened, because I was speaking at a conference the day before the lockdown. Mm. And I said, because someone talked about it and said, oh, maybe I don't know what I'm going to do if I have to have, we have to have our children at home all the time. And my husband and I already work at home. And I laid out some strategies, and then I said, there may be a silver lining, because I think all of us need to slow down and we need to lean into this extra time that we have with our family members to just connect. We can teach our children things that we didn't have time to teach them before, and just connect in very powerful ways. And I talked about that a lot, and nobody initially, all they were talking about was school. They were overwhelmed with having to homeschool their children and all of that. And I was like, please don't overlook the opportunity that we may have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you almost had an opportunity. And I know it's complicated, it's complex. I'm not one size fits alling all the moms, but and it's a very real concern and is a very big challenge if you're the primary breadwinner and the primary caregiver. Absolutely. But I do think that it was a really big invitation to sort of adjust things and maybe slow down if you wanted to, and just let some things go. Mm-hmm. Not so good for the writing. I definitely haven't done as much writing as I used to, but.
Well, it helped me tremendously, because I was in an empty house. My sons were both in school, and we decided not to have them come home. And my husband was traveling on business, and he just stayed. So the 3 of them stayed together, created a pod, and stayed there for a few months. And so that's how I was able to do a lot of writing.
Wow. Do you see me drooling, like, right there?
Well, they were born 2 weeks early. So that was a joke in my family. It was always, you guys owe me 2 weeks. And so I got 2 weeks and then some.
Yeah.
This is amazing. I'm literally just soaking up all the gems and the knowledge that have been shared, and I love this. And so we are definitely coming to the end, where we'll definitely make sure that everyone knows exactly where to find you all. And so if you are just now tuning in, or you skipped around a little bit, if you're watching the replay, make sure you rewind and watch everything. You don't want to miss the gems that are shared, especially from a mother's perspective. Definitely be sure to check out everyone's book. My book, which is the idea behind the nonfiction book panel, Seeing Life Through a Different Lens, a survivor's memoir on overcoming adversity with resilience. Definitely be sure to check it out as an ebook, audiobook, or paperback, and hear a perspective from both myself as the cancer survivor and my mom as the one who detected the cancer. She took the photograph that detected the eye cancer in my eye, and if it wasn't for my mother's intuition and for her photographic skills, I would not be literally seeing and looking at you today. And also, you can learn more about the nonfiction book panel, and also more about the book by going to zakiranayar.com. And that is my first name and my middle name. My first name is Arabic for the afterlife. My middle name is Arabic for bright light. So, yes, and I'm trying to make sure that you can show this right here so that you can get your copy as well. And now we'll move over to Ronit. Actually, I want you to talk about your podcast.
Okay.
As well.
Okay, so I'll do that. And so I am author of this book here. Oh, wait, there you go. When She Comes Back. And that's available wherever you get your books. It would be great if you can support an independent bookseller. You can find those links on my website right there. And there's an audiobook sample that I narrated that's available. You can just listen to the first 3 sections of the book on audio and see what you think. And I also have my other written work there, my other essays and my stories there, and work on, writing and things like that. Secondly, I do have a podcast, which is also at the website. It's called And Then Everything Changed, because I focus on interviews with guests who come to me. Maybe they're authors or social justice warriors, or maybe they're in recovery, and they want to talk about the pivotal moments in their life and the decisions that they feel define them and maybe set them on a new course. And so we spend about a half hour, 40 minutes talking about that. And then you get to learn about their life and how they coped with their challenges and how they found resilience. And it's been really great. I'm actually getting almost to my 100th episode and my 2-year anniversary. So you can find that wherever you get your podcasts.
Congrats on 100 episodes, because I know how much work it is.
I know.
Wow. So again, my book is Mother's Work, Pearls of Wisdom and Gems from My Journey. And you can pick it up at my website, carolmulletta.com/motherswork. And again, this is a book of my journey as a mom of twins and caring for a son who had developmental delays, and a mom raising children in 2 cultures, Black American and Ethiopian. And I hope that you will pick up a copy, and you can follow me on all social media platforms at the Parenting 411.
Oh my gosh. And Zakira, I forgot to say that in case anyone is listening and not able to read the screen, it's ronitplank.com. And I'm on all the social media platforms, just like Carol. So I'm Ronit Plank on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm really active on Instagram. I'm there every day for sure. So you can come find me. And I try to post stuff about writing, advice, quotes, and also just looks inside the process.
Yes, and I feel like I forgot to say the same thing for me. So if you want to learn more about, me as either a creative strategist or an author, right now on my Instagram, I try to talk more about mental health. I think where we are in the world, I feel like a lot of people are gravitating more to me for that. How have you managed your mental health? What tips do you have for me to manage mental health? How have you remained so calm in such, crazy situations? And I'll tell you how on my Instagram, but also all of my social media handles right now are at Illuminous1. Also, if you're listening instead of watching, it's ILLUMINOUSONE, and that is the meaning of my middle name. So Illuminous, which is bright light. So Illuminous1 everywhere on social media.
Yes, and can I just add that I launched my podcast, the Parenting 411 podcast, on Juneteenth. So you can
Oh,
find
wow.
that wherever you go for
Congratulations.
podcasts. Thank you so much. And of course, I still host the Parenting 411 radio show on Radio 1's Baltimore station. And in fact, we have an episode this Friday.
That's
Every
exciting,
Friday.
Carol. So busy.
Yeah. So is it how often do you have your shows now, Cal?
It is the second Friday. I've cut back because of the podcast and other work that I'm doing. So it is the second Friday of the month.
Okay, perfect. Now, one more thing, Carol, because yes, you are very busy. You became a co-author of an amazing book.
Mm-hmm.
So, you mind showing us and telling us just a little bit about that?
Okay, this book is entitled "You Are Enough: Messages of Inspiration and Empowerment to Live Your Best Life," and it is power-packed. It is spearheaded by the amazing Les Brown and Dr. Cheryl Wood. And so there are 74 co-authors that are sharing messages with you to remind you that you are worthy and that you deserve to pursue your goals and to really create the life that you love, that you deserve the opportunity to do that. So it provides a lot of confidence, motivation. It's a very, I'm enjoying the book myself.
I love that. Well,
and that's also on my website. Yeah, that's also on my website too.
Mulletta.com.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, ladies. This has been so amazing.
Oh, so great.
Thank
you so much for the platform and for inviting us on. And Carol, it was so good to meet you and learn about your work.
Mm-hmm.
And Zakira, you do so much good work. I don't know how you keep up with all the stuff that you have your attention on, but it's amazing. Right. And I'm so grateful that you've included me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's just been a pleasure meeting you, Ronit. I'm sure I'll want to talk to you later, to see about maybe coming on my podcast or show.
And vice versa.
Thank you. And of course, Zakira has been on my show. I really enjoyed that. But you know what, conversation.
Carol, you've been on my panel, you've been on my summit, but not the podcast.
Well, I'd love to do it if you think it's a good fit. Absolutely. But thank you so much again for your platform. I have really enjoyed knowing you and working with you, and absolutely would be honored to be on your podcast.
Thank you. And for those of you who are watching, definitely be sure to share this video. Definitely be sure to comment. Let us know what your favorite part was, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.